welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate Podcast. Today, my guest just isn't a logo designer. He's a content creator, educator, freelancer. And let me tell you, he is redefining what it means to build a creative business in this digital world. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest is James Barnard. How are you doing, James?
Wow, that was quite the intro. Thank you very much. Imposter syndrome is flaring right now, but yeah, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
Man, you've done it. You've done it. You have literally flipped it on its head. And I can say I'm not even going, probably my students are going to be upset about this, but I have purchased a few of your courses and applied them to my own class. So I'm like, hey, if this is what's working for him and this is what's working to get him clients, I want my students to have the same exact material.
I love that. When I hear from people that work in classrooms like teachers, professors, and they tell me that they show my videos in front of their students, that fills me with joy. I absolutely love that because as I'm sure we'll get into this, this whole education space for me is relatively new in terms of my career. But when I hear that bona fide institutions are actually using my videos as resources in the classroom, that's so cool. I absolutely love that. So firstly, thank you for showing your students my stuff, or a generation of graphic designers is going to grow up knowing who I am, which is people like you. So I appreciate it.
Man, thank you for putting it out there. So let's just start with your career. Did you ever imagine yourself becoming a creative director? Was that always the goal to be a hands-on designer or someone that pulls back and kind of just says, hey, you do this, you do that. Yeah, you do this, you do that.
Yeah, that's a lot of people's route into the industry, isn't it? Like people think creative director is like the end goal for us graphic designers, and it was for me. From being completely honest, I remember saying in one of my first interviews for a graphic design position that I got asked like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I said to the creative director at the time, "I want your job." And then as it happened, I worked in the publishing industry in the UK. Worked all the way through to ending up at a national newspaper. And my last full-time role before I went freelance was a head of digital design position. So I had a small team underneath me, maybe 4 or 5 designers, and I loved working with them. I loved sort of working with their skills and training them up and passing on where I could. But ultimately, that role ended up with me putting out fires all the time with the clients. I was doing less and less of the design work. Really didn't enjoy that. I love being hands-on. And so I realized, creative director, art director is not for me. It's not the route that I want to go down. So I left and went freelance.
Mm.
And the idea was originally to pay the bills with a couple of freelance gigs while I found a new full-time role. And that was 10 years ago. I never went back to full-time role because the freelance life, it was just too good. I couldn't pass up, taking naps in the middle of the day, running an errand whenever I wanted to. The freedom was just too good. So then it became about, selling myself and selling my services as a designer and finding my position in this world as a freelance creative, which was, a rocky road, but we're here now.
So just out of curiosity, how did going freelance like shift your outlook on creativity and business since you were in a business that kind of left a sour taste in your mouth with putting out all those fires? How did going freelance like just shift that outlook for you?
Well, initially, I went into agencies on a day rate. So I would go into around London. Basically, when I went freelance, I put my CV out to loads and loads of recruiters and said, "Have you got anything?" And they're like, "Nothing permanent. We've got some agencies that need your help." I was like, "Great." I went into places like Havas Worldwide, McCann, Ericsson, some really big agencies in London, and I got loads and loads of experience. And so it became about me selling my services and selling my wares and positioning myself in the market so that I could actually still have a career, but just not working for one person. So initially, it started out as me, going in as a gun for hire, like this selling my time for work at an agency, and then I got loads and loads of experience on like pitches, working with a vast array of different clients because I'd been in house for a very long time and suddenly was exposed to huge amounts of client work. So that was just like what a baptism of fire. Like I could not have learned
Mhm.
more in that sort of short space of time. And then eventually, COVID happened and we all got kind of locked down. We had our firstborn. Me and my wife had a little baby girl, and at the time, my wife earned way more than I did, so I
Mhm.
was the stay-at-home dad. I stayed at home and tried to run a business from my, spare bedroom, pulling in some beer money where I could, like, in between,
Yeah.
naps, that kind of thing. And then eventually, niched down into branding and logo design, and that's where things really kind of changed. As soon as I decided to do that,
Mhm.
that was where things really sort of started ramping up for me.
That's interesting because you just said logo design, and I'm just curious, like, you brand yourself as a logo designer
Yeah.
rather than the fancy titles we've all heard as designers.
Fancy this
Yes.
visual identity ninja.
You literally can take
Thank you,
you
buddy.
can literally say in ChatGPT, "I'm a graphic designer. What title should I have?" And it'll give you the fanciest ones. So, why is that? Why did you choose logo designer rather than one of these fancier titles?
Well, if I'm honest, it explains it so succinctly, and it's such a great searchable term. So if you have something like a small business, who's looking to get started, they're not searching, "How do I find a brand strategist?" or "Where's the best visual identity designer in London?" They type in "logo designer London." And for me, it meant that I could target my website for those keywords. So initially, I got quite a lot of business by rewriting my homepage and changing the wording on my landing pages for clients that targeted the keywords freelance logo designer London. And in about the space of about 2 months, I shot up the rankings on Google and I was number one for that search term for a long time. I think I actually still am today, even though I now live in Australia. If you type in freelance logo designer London, I think I'm still pretty far up there. And
Wow.
that wasn't that hard, if I'm honest. I just found those keywords that were quite easy to sort of target. Rewrote a couple of things on my homepage, and bingo, bango, bungo, I'm suddenly now one of the most searched for designers in the UK,
Yeah.
which is unbelievable. So that totally made sense for me to target those keywords,
Mhm.
and from there I can sell the services on top of that using Logo Designer as the start point of that sale. But I've had, I have a lot of people disagreeing with me on this, and I shouldn't brand myself this way, and then it kind of I miss out on other opportunities because I'm not targeting a certain range of clients,
Yeah.
maybe clients that are willing to spend a bit more and know a thing or two about the industry and have done their homework would be searching like brand strategy or
Mhm.
branding designer. It was just at that point in time, that's how it kind of worked for me. So who knows? I might change it. These days, I do go by logo and visual identity designer. So the logo is still in there, but I've actually, expanded that a little bit to visual identity as well because I can do all the other stuff as well. I can make you all of the facets of
Mhm.
the visual part of the branding, the background patterns, the website, the animated version of the logo, all of the color treatments, that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So it's within my wheelhouse. I just used logo as the entry point into that relationship with the client.
So just curious, you went the SEO route. Now, did you find that to be, well, of course, you found it to be super beneficial, but would you advise young and up and coming designers who are trying to position themselves online to go that route of using the SEO way of branding themselves, kind of like what you did?
I mean, there's loads of ways to bring in leads. There's SEO, there's social media, there's cold calling, there's
Mhm.
all sorts of things you can do. Direct mail. The one that worked for me originally before I took off on social media was SEO, and it wasn't that hard to do. I wrote a few articles. I changed a few things on my website. I structured the keywords in a certain way so that I could use a little bit of my web design background to make my website work harder for me, and it totally worked. I think I was bringing in like 5 or 6 leads a week just from
Oh, wow.
SEO alone, which is, not to be sniffed at. That's pretty great. They didn't all
Yeah.
convert because I'm a terrible salesman and I can't sell myself. But in the end, it was bringing in enough money to live on, and that was not to be sniffed at. Later on, social media came into play, and that changed the game. And I've done less and less work on my website now because I kind of don't need to. But ultimately, your clients will end up on your website and look at
Mhm.
your portfolio. So you do need to be putting in the work there and making sure that your website is speaking for you and
Mhm.
doing a lot of the hard work. So that's things like, making sure that your case studies are there. You've got great testimonials from your clients. Your mock-ups are premium looking, like the site looks just genuinely premium overall. And that takes work. So, you've got to put the legwork in with the website. Otherwise, when they eventually do come through and look at the be all and end all of your marketing material, which is usually your website, it's gotta sell you well. It's gotta work hard for you.
Yes. So let's stay in this space with logo design for a minute. What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about a logo designer or logo designs?
I ask this question a lot. It's People think it's easy because it's simple, right? So you take a look at like a logo, and it's this simple abstract pattern, and people look at that and go, "Well, I could design that." What they don't see is the weeks of work behind creating it.
100%. Yep.
So our jobs as logo and visual identity designers, just using my own phrase there, is to take your client's company's ethos, beliefs, values, roll it into a ball, spit out one single symbol that represents your company and your industry at a glance. And if that design is even remotely close to something that's already been done before, we can't use it. So, there's all sorts of challenges there in terms of like bringing that to life and making sure that you don't step on anybody else's toes when eventually that logo is put out into the world. It's hard. It takes time. It takes weeks and weeks of work. It takes years of experience to eke that information out from a client and bring it to life. So yeah, it's not easy. I'd say is the biggest misconception.
So I would say, do you think you've developed a more gentle approach to guiding them towards like understanding what the decision is that they're making, what they're stepping into when they're hiring you?
Yeah. Well, part of that comes like right away with the budget conversation, right? So, in my mind, and I'm a logo designer, I'm biased. I'm going to say that, your logo is one of the most important parts of your brand. It's one of the first things people will see. And you need to put the time and money into investing in that because it will bring trust to your brand and it will separate you from the competition. And that can be, depending on who you speak to, that conversation can be very different. If they are approaching this from a budget mindset and they want something quick and dirty and cheap, I'm not the right fit for you, and we'll have that conversation pretty early on. If you are willing to spend over, a certain amount, and you've really thought about this, and you're willing to put the time in to invest in your brand in the early stage, then we can have a conversation. And then it's just about having that conversation about going backwards and forwards with them and trying to work out what they're trying to achieve with this new brand. Who are they trying to target? And that comes over a few conversations. It's not just a quick email. Usually it's usually like a bit of a back and forth to figure out what's right for them. So yeah, it's a gentle nudge in the right directions.
Yeah.
When just a gentle chat, and I'm pretty clear straight away.
Mhm.
You tend to get an idea of who the clients, are the ones to take seriously. And if they're asking straight away, how much for a logo, mate? That's we're in trouble there. That's a big red flag. So yeah, I'll just try and steer them away from me if that's the case. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you the $1,000,000 question. How do you handle clients who undervalue your design? And you know where I'm going with this. I got a friend or a cousin that can do it.
Yeah. That's the old chestnut, eh? Well, first of all, they shouldn't be coming to someone like me. If
Uh-huh.
they do have that friend or cousin, get them to do it for you. There's two parts to this, isn't there? There's like,
Right.
how do you upsell a
Mhm.
potential lead on investing maybe a little bit more? And part of that is just having that conversation and just trying to show that down the line, if you don't get this right now, you're eventually going to have to change it anyway. If your company does well enough, how proud are you gonna be of this logo that you spent very little on, and maybe you've gone to somewhere like one of these, race to zero websites like Fiverr or Upwork,
Mhm.
and you don't know if the logo has been copied from somewhere else, which is unfortunately a very big problem with, sites like that. If you come to somebody experienced, you're gonna get a design that stands the test of time right from the start. It's gonna
Mm.
scale well. It's gonna work in multiple formats. You're gonna have variations that work in different mediums, and they're gonna be proud of it. That's the biggest part of this. They have to be proud of that design that represents their business, and they're gonna see it every single day. on
Yep.
their email, on their website, on their business cards. If they're not proud of that design, it's going to eat away at them. And that's a huge part of it. So that's my conversation that I have, is like just reminding them that down the line, this logo is just going to be there forever. That's the aim of the game. It's this logo will never be changed. It will represent you as this till the end of time, or at least the length of the business. And so, that's what I try and remind them at the start of the process. It's worth investing the time and the money right now to eventually bring this brand to life and come up with something that they're truly proud of.
Yeah. So I saw on your Instagram, it was pretty funny. And I was just like, this is a man that's being fully transparent. So share, if you don't mind sharing with us about how your your favorite client, your wife, didn't like the logo you first did and made you redo it. If you don't mind sharing us that process
Yeah.
of that.
Everybody in my family gets one freebie, right? My wife, yeah, unfortunately, has more than one freebie from me. I think I worked out the other day, like, how much, you know,
Uh,
she would have had to pay me for all the values that I've given over the years, and I could have bought a car or a jet ski or something like that. Yeah, my wife is the hardest client I've ever worked with, without a shadow of a doubt. Mainly because she works next door to me. For your listeners, my wife runs an e-commerce business. It's called
mhm,
Hacker Lily, and it's like a baby hip seat carrier. It straps around your waist. It's just basically a shelf that you put your baby on, and you can support them with one arm. Just takes the weight off of them while you're running around the house or standing in line at the airport, that kind of thing.
mhm,
Little plug for Laura there. Anyway, I did her logo maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I did it very quickly and for free, obviously. And at the time, I designed it on Instagram Live, and it served a purpose. It wasn't the best design I've ever done, but it totally worked for the time. And since that point, we've had problems with manufacturing. We've had issues embossing the logo. We've had issues embroidering it because there was just too much detail. Classic example of like putting the legwork in at the start. Fortunately, at the time, she wasn't paying me and I had client work on. I just couldn't invest the time to really, really do this properly for her, and she needed it quickly. What's happened is, the company's gotten very big now. She's dealing with distributors. She's actually, she's exploding, and
congrats. That's dope.
yeah, it's amazing. And she's in multiple countries now, and that old logo is just not fit for purpose anymore. But the same problem occurred. I can't charge her. So what do we do? And
Yeah.
we came up with a solution, which was I would do the logo and we would use another agency to roll it out. So I basically worked with another agency to create this whole brand system. So I did the mark and the logo type, but working with that agency, they then took that and rolled out a suite of assets, a suite of brand guidelines, treatments for social media, and the boxes and the packaging. And it was cool. It was like I'd never worked that way before, working with another agency. And it's cool because I got to kind of see their behind the scenes and how they do things, and they got to see how I do things. And
Yeah.
it was really great. And we put it out in the world maybe a month or so ago. And yeah, it's been, mixed reviews. Obviously, I have to say, there's any client, whenever we launch a logo into the real world, there's going to be people that don't like it. There's going to be people that love it. But it's important to know that we've been through the process and that it has meaning and it has a representation and it represents the industry. So we're proud of it. So yeah, it's out there in the world now. Sorry, I forgot your original question. I rumbled
No,
so
no,
long.
no. I just say no, it's totally fine. I just thought it was funny because you're like so serious, and then it goes to, so I'm redoing my wife's logo, and I was like, I get it. I get it. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
explain it.
I got a lot of flack for that. I wrote a post about saying, who designed this rubbish? Who
Yeah.
designed this piece of, and people were like, commented, how dare you trash somebody else's work? And I was like, I did. I designed this piece of crap. And then people were like deleting the comments. So yeah, it's quite
It's
funny
the
to see
best
that.
thing we've ever seen. They must be crazy if they don't love it.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
So, would you mind walking us through like the process from like starting a new logo until like you get to the almost the end of it becoming this fully completed like brand idea?
Yeah, sure. So once we've got the them over the line and the deposit has been paid and the start date's been agreed on, a week before the start date happens, I'll get on a call with them. We'll do a full discovery process, and in that call, I'm looking to get two things from the client. One is a success statement for the project, so that's just like a paragraph of text that kind of grounds me in the project. So it could be something like, we're looking for a traditional looking logo that
Mhm,
is in these, maybe this color suite, doesn't tread on this company's toes, represents our industry. And maybe some specifics for that job. And that sits at the top of my Illustrator document as a little paragraph of text. And while I'm designing, I can just flick back to it and just make sure that I'm always, referring back to that success statement. And it's something that we've agreed on in the project. It's really handy. Another thing is the brand nouns. And this is something that I got from Alan Peters. It's a 4 or 5 things that I can use in the design phase. So these aren't words like growth or nature. They're words like tree, leaf. These are icons. These are things that I can use in the design. So I did a video about this the other day where I did a logo for a client that had the word electric in their name. So I used an extruded E with a lightning bolt in the middle, and I just guessed that they would like that design, and they ended up not liking it, and I wasted weeks of work. Had I gone through this process and checked the word lightning bolt, I could have just ruled that out immediately. So this brand noun process is so great. It's so freeing in the design when you can design confidently knowing that the concepts have been pre-approved with the client. It saves you so much time. It also means that the client gets involved in the creative process before the design starts. So they feel like they're involved. They feel like they've been part of this creative process, but they're not governing things in the design phase because that's not their area of expertise. That's yours. So they're not saying change the line weight. They're not saying change the typography. You're recommending these styles based on your years of experience. They should be, tweaking stuff like that. But having got them involved with this brand noun process and the success statement, they feel like they've been involved in the process. They've actually contributed to this whole offering, and that's more rewarding for them, and it leads to a faster sign off, because when that design comes through and it's using the concepts that we've pre-approved, there's no surprises. And that's meant that I've got work signed off first go a lot of the time, like a surprisingly large amount of time. I'll have clients sign off with no amends, and that's unbelievable. It means more clients through the door, means I can get through work faster and earn more money eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
So yeah, it's a great process. I got to thank Alan Peters for that. I've got his book right here, Logos That Last. That's where I got that process from. It's fantastic. It's like it totally changed things for me when I started doing that, pre-approving those words.
So brand nouns, is that what you said? Oh,
That's right. So they're like, these aren't, wishy-washy, overarching words. Let's say that this client I've been working on recently, I can't say the name of them because it's not out there, but they chose a moon, so like a crescent shape, a compass, and waves, because it was to do with, it's a charity that had those sort of connotations within it. And do you know how freeing that is when you go into Adobe Illustrator and you have those 3 things that you can work on and try and maybe splice a couple of those together, or work that into a logo type, knowing that the client is going to like it because they've said they will. It's brilliant. It makes you so confident in the design phase. It doesn't waste any time. You can really confidently attack a design that beforehand that those concepts have been pre-approved. And then it's about experimentation. It's about maybe mushing 2 of those shapes together. Or what I tried in this example was I took the compass needle, and in the central section of the needle, I angled it so that the shadow left a crescent inside the design. And such a fun way to work. Do you know what I mean? Like bringing the hidden meanings out of logos like that, when you know that those 2 words, the crescent and the compass, have already been pre-approved. You can just really, you can put some time into it, knowing that if this works, it's going to lead to a great mark. And it's so freeing. I can't recommend it enough.
okay. Because I think this is going to tap into what I'm coming up to next, but it's what you just said is I'm trying to think of who I spoke with last, but they said that a lot of your role as a designer is also uncovering brand strategies for the client, because sometimes the clients think they just need a logo, and it's like, actually you don't. So how much of your role, or better yet, how much of your time is actually peeling back those layers to get to the like bottom line of what they really want? Because you have those people that are like, hey, we're a nonprofit, we're thinking about going this route, but it's like
Mhm.
there has to be more there in their story. So how much of your role is actually peeling those layers back?
Yeah. It's probably the hardest part of the whole process, is that discovery call beforehand. And you've got to come prepared to that meeting with some ideas. You can't just rely on your client to come out with those nouns and that success statement. You really have to have a look at what they've done in their briefing form and research the industry a little bit, and then come to the meeting with some suggestions. And you might not nail those suggestions within the meeting. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks of back and forth afterwards to agree on them. So, for instance, that job I did for my wife, we did words like wings, an eagle, bridge, those kind of things. And it took a long time to agree on those. We really went backwards and forwards because I can't start until, my client, my wife has said
Okay.
that
Yeah.
these are the words that I'm allowed to use in this process. So that's hard. It really is. It does require some back and forth. It requires you listening like hell when they talk. So when a client you ask them about their company and they start just rambling about the ethos and how they got started, and just take relentless notes, write everything down that they're saying, pull out words from what they're saying. When they say things like connection, think about words that might represent that within the actual those nouns. For instance, I did a job for a marketing agency. I can't say the name of it annoyingly, but because it's not out there yet. But while they were talking, he said, "We're like the plumbers of the world. We connect the data and the developers together." And I was like, "Okay, the plumbers." And then from there, we came up with this whole system where we used like plumbing pipes to represent part of the design, and it totally worked. And luckily, didn't make them look like a plumbing company, which is always a risk. So that's another big part of it as well, as being, representing the industry at a glance. And that's one of the hardest parts about this process is like you need to do your research of their competitors. So you need to ask them who their competitors are. So you can check what the other logos in the space look like so that they're immediately sort of being reflected by
Yeah.
that design. It's something that sits in the back of my mind all the time. Like descriptive logos. There was a study by, I think it was the American marketing agency, that
Mhm.
descriptive logos perform better. So burger joints, put a burger in the logo and it works better
Yeah.
for things like service-based businesses. That's always in the back of my mind. But you can't do that all the time. Every time you design a coffee company, you can't have a coffee bean in it every single time. Otherwise there'll be nothing unique in the world. So you have to kind of find like a happy medium between that. It's difficult.
So can you talk about how you find the balance between a logo being like meaningful versus immediately recognizable?
Yeah,
Because
I get.
it just came to mind because it's like you're working with so many different brands along this spectrum. It's like, how do you know when it needs to be something very meaningful to that company versus, okay, we got to get you out there. And since you're going to be in a certain niche or group, we have to find a way to make your logo or your image or your mark stand out loud and
Yeah.
proud. So how do you find that healthy balance?
So the important thing for me is that there's meaning in the design. That's
Mhm.
the number one, factor for this. Putting meaning in the abstract and making sure that the client is proud of it and that it has a story behind it.
Yeah.
And then secondary to that is style. So, and that is how you treat that design, whether it's like bold colors or whether it's like a little more intricate style of like the lines within the logo, whether it's
Yeah.
like less bold or less in your face. You're looking at the other designs in the industry to try and get a feel of what this should look like. So it's about meaning versus style and trying to find the balance between the two of them. And I'll often have like three variations of the same design that are like different styles between them, like
Mhm.
different color choices or different the way those nouns have been woven together.
Gotcha.
They might be the same logo, but stylistically they're totally different. And it's about trying to find the one that just feels right. And it's hard. And sometimes you get so close to the design and you're so happy with the way it looks and you send it over and the client goes, "It's great, but it looks like a hairdresser company." And you're right.
Yeah.
They're right. You're so close to the design. You haven't thought about how this is going to look out in the real world on their signage
Mhm.
on the high street. It's a difficult one. So yeah, first and foremost, it's about finding meaning and then making sure that that meaning sits well within the industry because that's a really difficult thing to do.
So let's talk about the creative decision part of this. What are some non-negotiables when it comes to being an effective logo designer?
Are you talking about like the non-negotiable rules of logo design?
Yeah.
I mean,
But what
no,
about but what are they for you? Are they have you I, maybe I should phrase it as you've been doing this so long. Have you rewrote some new rules, added some in, or have you better yet stuck with those unwritten rules?
Well, look, I'm looking at like the Bible of logo design first and foremost. You know, does it scale well in a very very small format? Does it work? Is the design is making sure that we're not following any trends? Is it timeless? Or you know, those sort of standard rules of logo design. Is there a one color variation? Is there a version that works well on a light and dark
Mhm,
background? But then I'm trying to put my not my personality, but like the client's personality into that design.
mhm,
And that's not easy. You know, that's really, really tricky. So I'm working within those guidelines to try and make sure that the design holds up. One really good piece of advice I got from, again, Alan Peters, my hero, was to, when you're working on the design, what can you remove from the logo to simplify it before it starts treading on anybody else's toes? And if you were to redesign this logo in 15 years' time, what could you take away to make it more reductive and to make it
mhm,
more simple? And that's a great way, you know, to look at your own work is when you take a break, you go to sleep and you come back to your work the next day. How can I simplify this down and how can I
mhm.
make this as reductive as possible while not plagiarizing anybody else? And there's a really fine line there. You know, the simpler you make a design, the more likely it is somebody's already done it before. So it's a tricky thing to do. But yeah, I've always got those rules in the back of my head. I'm always thinking like, when I put this on a black background, is it going to work well in a one color format against a load of other competitors when they, you know, sponsor a trade show and is suddenly sitting alongside 10 other logos from other brands? Is it going to help them stand out? So yeah, there's all sorts of things that you have to consider. But yeah, they're always in the back of my mind while I'm working.
Mm. Let's talk about how you mentioned like that simplicity of making a logo. So, do you ever find yourself in that that tough battle of simplicity versus originality? How do you handle that? Because I know that can
So
be dreadful. Yep. I said
it's the
right
worst.
on there.
When
Yep.
you come up with a design and it's so simple and you're like, you know in your heart of hearts someone's done this before. And, you know, we can talk about like how to anti-plagiarism check. Like I use a number of resources for that. We have
Mhm.
the WIPO database, which is like a list of trademarked logos, and it has like a reverse image search within there. So you can upload your design in black and white to check that it's not a design that's already been trademarked. There's obviously places like Google Images, which is
Mhm.
probably my most used, just to drop the logo in a black and white format into the images and just check that, you know, if anything else has come up. And also, what works well is when you have a concept and it is using a certain format, type that into Google, like a logo that uses, like we discussed before, a logo that uses a crescent shape inside a compass needle, and just search for that and just see what comes up, because that often gives you similar results that weren't like the one that you uploaded.
Mhm.
And you often find that, you know, I've done that before. I did a design for a production company in London called Camden Productions, and I think we incorporated a C into a camera icon. And, you know, this is years ago before while I was like, cramming letters together to make
Yeah.
great monograms. I Googled that phrase, a C camera logo, and almost an identical design came up immediately. It's like, great, like
Wow.
back to the drawing board again.
Mhm.
It's tough. It's one of the worst parts about the design is working really hard on something, getting into the weeds with it, and then you check it and someone's done it before. But unfortunately, that's part of the process for us. And that's one of the reasons why clients are coming to people like me, is that I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to make sure that to my knowledge, I'm not treading on anybody else's toes.
Mhm.
Sometimes that comes from your experience, you know, thumbing through design inspiration books. I did a logo for my wife's company, which was actually a rejected design from a client that totally fit her business.
Mm.
And I found it in a book, in a design inspiration book from an old design that wasn't out there. So when you Googled it, it didn't come up, but there it was in black and white in front of me. And I was like, for God's sake, I can't win. So it's tough. You have to, you know, your experience counts for a lot there. And I think that's one of the reasons why I can justify charging a bit more, is that I'll do my homework with this. And to my knowledge, I will do my best to make sure that I haven't copied anybody else.
So, this is probably another $1,000,000 question. We're gonna be rich by the end of this, but how do you connect with better yet, how do you disconnect from technology to kinda get back to that original flair of just pen to
On
paper?
paper. Yeah.
Yes.
I look, unfortunately, I'm terrible at drawing. I feel really uncomfortable in the sketchbook, which is the most backward thing ever for a graphic designer. But
Yeah.
the one thing I have going for me is my speed in the software. So the way I like to work is I do have a sketchbook. I have my brand nouns within that sketchbook, and I'll start drawing lines and connections to see if I can make anything kind of come together. But as fast as humanly possible, I am out of that sketchbook and throwing it into Illustrator to see if those connections have legs or not. And if they don't, I'm back to the sketchbook, sketching again, doing quick lines because that's faster. Putting pen to paper is immediately quicker. But then I'm lightning fast in Illustrator. I'm gonna float my own boat here. I'm really fast. So
Oh,
I
wow.
could bring that
Oh, wow.
sketch to life, in a matter of minutes
Yeah.
to see if it holds up and if it actually looks professional enough in a vector format.
Mhm.
And then from there, if I can see it's coming together, I'm like, right, I want
Mhm.
to spend a bit more time refining this. And then I'll have, 2 or 3 ideas really, really quickly. But getting out of that sketchbook is a priority for me because I feel it makes me, I get huge imposter syndrome when I start sketching. Like I'm terrible at this. You see people online tracing
Their
very
sketch.
detailed sketches in Adobe Illustrator. I do not work like that. I can't work like that. My sketchbook is embarrassing. So I'm basically just using like little dots and connections. I'm using the grid paper to see if I can make something work really really quickly.
I'm trying to
That's
find my
usually the
sketch.
software.
I'm trying to find my sketch,
You'll
but
have
I'm not a drawer. Look at this. I am a word guy. I am a word and
are
under the
you?
line. I can find an image quicker by writing it down. Be like, I'm thinking
Yeah.
of a bird with a golden duck. I write it out quicker than I sketch it out, even though I
Oh.
can.
Yeah, yeah. Thing is, with my process, that step's already been done, right? So
Mhm.
those words and those connections are within the
Yeah.
brand noun process. But yeah, my sketchbook looks like that. I don't know if you can see that on your camera. Like it's not
Oh yeah, there it is. Yep.
okay. It's like horrible line drawings. Another one here I was working on with my assistant for her logo. She wanted an octopus with an ink droplet.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Just
Yep.
terrible. They're rubbish.
They're
But
not bad. It gives you a good point to start from, trust me.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I'm in the, communications department at my university. Listen, don't ask me why, but I'm in the communications department at my university, and so I'm working with, like, journalists, TV, broadcasting majors, and we know
Well,
that they're
short note or shorthand.
yes.
Yeah.
So their strength is writing, and I kind of looked at that and I was like, "Okay, now I gotta get you guys to sketching." Like, once you can
Yeah.
turn those words into images, you'll feel a lot more confident, but I like to get people to start where they are their strongest,
Yeah.
so they don't feel like they're kinda like a fish out of water when it comes to design.
I know. I feel like I should do like some sort of course on, like a learning to draw course. And my daughter's 6 right now. She's massively into drawing. She's on YouTube watching tutorials, and I feel like maybe that's something we could do together. And she's really good.
Yeah.
So maybe I can learn alongside her and up my game a little bit.
Mm.
Because I have a lot of competitors in my space who are very illustrative and can
Mhm.
create really like logos with a lot of personality because of their illustration background. And my logos are quite shape based. I wouldn't say formulaic, but they do look a certain way. That it's
Mhm.
very unlikely that you'll see an illustrated style design within my portfolio because it's just not my strong suit at all.
Right.
But I'm lucky that I've got the skills in the software to bring abstract shapes to life and make
Yes.
them, really harmonious and balanced. And I think that's my strong suit. I'm just not an illustrator at heart. It
Yeah.
doesn't work for me.
Listen, it's all good. You're knocking designs out the park
I
even
found
without
my niche. I
sketching.
found my
Yes.
heart in this world. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So let's talk about the meaning of design to you for a minute. You said you love finding meaning in the abstract. Can you unpack what that means for your design process now?
Where did you hear that quote? You've been stalking me. Where did I say
Listen,
that?
listen. I come prepared. I come
Good.
prepared.
I'm impressed. I think I read that in an article somewhere. Yeah, yeah. Meaning in the abstract. It's basically trying to find something that represents your industry and hasn't been plagiarized is hard. And to incorporate meaning in that design is even harder. And I think this is one of those things I was talking about before about being proud of your logo.
Mhm.
One of the greatest ways to kind of make the logo stand the test of time is to crowbar, not crowbar, because that sounds like you're forcing it, but like to make sure that your logo means something to you. It's not just a shape. It's not just something that you plucked out of thin air
Right.
and, it doesn't mean anything to your business. It has a story behind it. It has some kind of meaning in the design. I've been doing this for ages. I've designed logos that smush two characters together. What's your
Yeah.
first and your last name? David Edgar, right? D&E. Let's mush them together. Great, we've got a logo. Doesn't mean anything other than it reflects their name. And those logos that I designed in the past, they're all gone. They're temporary. They're disposable. They're rubbish. As soon as I started putting meaning into the design and actually showing that you can tell a story with the design, those logos started lasting. And I've got one logo that I did for a restaurant, maybe like 8 years ago now. And it's one of the first ones I ever did where there's really a story behind it. It was for a pizza restaurant called Otto. And there's an Arabic area in Abu Dhabi. But the name Otto in Italian is eight. So we found the Arabic symbol for eight, which looks like an upside down triangle. And we took the O of the Otto, cut a pizza slice from the O, and in the negative space left the character for the Arabic symbol. Immediately, like, it was clever. It had a little Easter egg. It meant something to the business, and they still use that today, like 8 years later. It was one of those designs that really stood the test of time. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I do this for all my future clients. It's just such a great way to make this logo last. So yeah, that's why I think it's important to sort of, where possible, get as much value and as much meaning as possible into those shapes, into those abstract designs.
Yes. So, do you now find yourself intentionally doing that, giving them those hidden meetings or visual Easter eggs and telling them, or do you kind of just lay it on the table and slide it to them like, "What do you guys think?" and then kind of let them like digest it?
Easter eggs are great when they work. When you try and force them, though, they're sometimes a bit cliched. It's always a bonus if that meaning is revealed in a clever way, usually within some sort of negative space. But I'm not looking for that when I do it. It's kind of like a happy accident. But when you can do it in a clever way that's still simple enough and still reductive, that's great. And my clients live for that. When they get to explain to their customer, have you noticed the hidden thing in here? It just fills them with joy, and that's a great little gift that you can give to your clients. But it's that you don't have to do it all the time, and you shouldn't be trying to do it all the time. But if it comes together and it works and it's balanced and it's simple, then totally, and try and get it done if you possibly can. And it doesn't have to be as a hidden thing. It can be right in your face, as long as it's clear and that there's the story and then ethos is in there somewhere, then I think that's the important thing. And then what happens is, over time, their brand gets assigned to that design. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not like it's like their ethos and their company becomes associated with that symbol,
Yeah.
rather than it immediately being apparent, like what it represents.
Yeah.
There's a bit of an argument there, isn't there? Like, how reflective should the design be? If a client has to explain the hidden meaning in the design, is it really doing its job? But essentially, the logo is like the visual representation of their business, and it's not,
Yes.
that reputation and that language and that ethos gets attributed to that design over a period of time through the work that that client does with their brand. So the visual side of it is my part. The other side of it, the tone of voice, what they stand for, their reputation, that's on them, and that will be associated with that design over the long haul.
So this one I've heard, you've heard, and you kind of touched on it briefly right now. But how does that make you feel when you hear branding is not your logo?
Okay, I my job is to sell logo designs to clients, so I'm not going to say that. Obviously, I say like a logo is a hugely important part of your brand too. But you're right, branding isn't just your logo. A logo is a very small part of that.
Yes.
Maybe a bigger part than I would, that I would tell my clients. A logo is like, it's the first thing a lot of the time that people see. And let's say you're in a business that is in a pretty saturated market and lots of competitors in the space. People are going to look for the one that looks the most trustworthy. And that usually comes from a great looking visual identity. And
Mhm.
when people spend the time on it and they have a system that works really well and it's balanced and it's clean and it reads well and immediately just appeals, it just sets them apart from the competition. That is why, a logo can be one of the most important parts of that brand. But yeah, like I was saying before, tone of voice, reputation, all of that stuff is a massive part of a brand, which is why I don't call myself a branding designer or a brand strategist because I don't do tone of voice. I'm not a copywriter. I'm not great at the strategy, if I'm being completely honest. I'm great at the visual side of things. And sometimes I'll work with another agency with clients and we'll do them both together. People like naming agencies or tone of voice, copywriters, that
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm the visual guy. I'm the guy that's going to make sure that you have a system that works and you've got your colors right and your typefaces and you've got a brand guidelines book, you
Yeah.
can use to protect your brand. So that's where I kind of come into things.
So you mentioned this, a logo having trust. How how do you let's see. How can you design something like that when you have such a saturated market with logos coming out every which way with the money, the color, the client, the famous person, and you're looking at it like, are we looking at the same thing you guys are seeing here?
Yeah.
Like, how does a logo influence like trust in such a chaotic market?
Well, I think it's very apparent when you have a logo that's been done on the cheap side by side with one that someone spent some time on. It's so easy to see, the difference between a good and a bad logo when they're side by side like that. And I think that's the important thing is when they are in a saturated market and they do a Google search and those logos are suddenly next to each other. The good one will separate itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that, and that comes from those things that we were talking about before, all of the rules that we followed, making sure it works well in a small scale, making sure that it works well in one color. Those design principles really are important when it comes to that. And you can tell when a logo has been designed by somebody that doesn't know those rules.
Mhm.
Things when they've got drop shadow on it, when they've got 7 different colors in the design, when there's two typefaces in sorry, 2 or 3 typefaces within, well, one single logo type. When they're side by side like that, it's really easy to tell. So I think that's one of the reasons why coming to someone like me can separate you from the competition, especially in those crowded markets.
So let's take a quick little pivot to everybody's favorite topic, AI. How are you feeling, man, about the growing presence in AI in graphic design?
Oh,
Or in
it's a mixed bag, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think within logo design, so far, I'm pretty safe. It doesn't, so far, AI sucks at logos. They still do. They're too complicated. They're always really
Yep.
cheesy. It doesn't do a great job. It's
The
AI
line work is
can't.
terrible.
Yeah, and they always need fixing. And also, finding meaning, like I was saying before, finding meaning in the abstract. But, like, AI is not great at concepting. It can't pull hidden meaning out of something
No.
or work in a clever way to
Yep.
reveal, another shape or a style or maybe that Easter egg we were talking about. It can't do that yet, and that's great, and it means that people like me still have a job. Other sides of AI, though, I'm all for. Like, anytime AI can be used to speed us up or to remove a task that used to be hard, I'm here for that. Generative extend, generative fill, that kind of stuff. Using AI to, remove dust and scratches from an image or to clean things up or, anything where it speeds us up. It's fantastic. So I love AI tools within software to speed us up. It's the generative stuff I do worry about because it is
Terrible.
a scary time right now for designers, isn't it? Like, where do we find our place in this world? But we designers will always get better results than
Yeah.
non-designers. If we're using the same tools, I think designers will still get better results than the clients will themselves. So they still need us to an extent, and it's about our execution of using those tools rather than the fact that they're kind of hopefully not devaluing our industry by making it look too easy, because it's not.
Mhm.
To
No,
get great results from AI does require work. You can't just
yeah.
throw something in and get something super professional and using it in an advert. You got to put some work into it. You got to do some cleanup at the end as well. So yeah, it is scary though, isn't it? And it's everywhere right now. But luckily, my industry's so far reasonably safe.
Yeah. I have found myself actually allowing it, but they can't use it for images. I've had my students use it as more of a resource tool
Yeah.
instead of, hey, I have a barbecue sauce company from Peru. Can you give me a logo? Like they can't
Right.
do that. They have to
Yeah.
use it more on the side of like some of these students don't, they're not, like I said, I have communication majors. So
Mhm.
they're not into like deep color theory. They're coming in finishing writing a news article and now they have to sit here and try to find different colors and palettes. So I'm like,
Mhm.
look up different color palettes for Peru. Give them winter, spring, and fall. Okay, you starting to see like I have them use it in that format rather
Yeah.
than
Using it for concepting is good,
yes.
isn't it? Have you seen this
Mhm.
new tool that Adobe are bringing out called Boards, where it's like a
Mhm.
mood boarding tool that incorporates generative AI inside it? And I think that's great. Let's say you're
Really?
about to do a photo shoot and you need some reference images for them to put together. You can use AI to do that. And it's a collaborative tool, like multiple people can dive in at the same time and create concepts off of different ideas. And it's like a huge kind of brainstorm of ideas all in one canvas. So yeah, that's brilliant. When you use AI to concept and to
Yes.
pull in reference imagery
100%.
and to get a client aligned on an idea when you can't find the image online or through a stock website,
Yeah.
why not use AI to do it? That's fantastic. I think that's brilliant to
Wow.
kind of steer the conversation in the right direction to end up with a great result.
I did
That's
not know they when did they
Oh, it's brand
is
new. I don't think it's even out
okay.
yet, but they
Okay.
announced it, a few months ago. It was
Because
called something else, and they changed it to I think it was called, like, Project Concept, and now they've changed it to Boards. So it'll be like a huge kind of, scrapbooking kind of tool, but you can use AI to generate reference images off of
yeah.
lots of different things, and it's very clever. So, yeah, I'm all for that.
Okay, yeah, I'm totally open to check that out because I have my students doing mood boards, but I have them using like Pinterest, Google,
Mhm.
a few other design, like the free, what is it? The free
Tools.
archive. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
Pixels,
yeah.
the free
Pixels for
archive.
images, yeah,
Yeah, I have them using that and I have them usually using Google Slides to put it together. Or
right.
if they're on Pinterest and they have enough information on Pinterest, they can create something through that. But
Yeah,
I will definitely be on board for using
it's
that.
brilliant. It looks awesome.
Yes. So, what skills do you think will keep designers valuable and ahead of this AI forever evolving turn?
Cool. That's a tough question. I mean, I guess selling yourself, being able to sell the value of what you do in this world where things look cheap now because they can be done fast with AI, that's going to be a
Mm,
hard thing to do. Selling, why they should hire you and why you can create a better result
mhm.
than AI is going to be the main game going forward, I think.
Yeah.
And for me, it's because I'm in an industry that is relatively safe so far from
Mhm.
AI, but it's not actually that safe. I'll give you an example. Like my local the gym that I go to near me, he's spinning off a little side business, and he knows I'm a logo designer, but he went and did it in AI. He goes, "What do you think of this?" I used AI, and then I think he wanted me to say it was fantastic, and it was terrible. But for him, it served a purpose,
Yeah.
and it got him over. And there's the difference, isn't it? Like when a client doesn't value it in the first place,
Yep.
they're not going to evaluate it, you know,
At all.
down the line. Exactly.
Yeah.
The AI makes no difference whatsoever in that respect. They're either going to value great design or they're not. And it's our job to convince them why, spending a
Yeah.
bit more on the design is the right move,
Yeah.
because it will last longer and it'll stand the test of time. So yeah, there's the goal there is to basically
Mhm.
learn the value of selling what you do, or the value of explaining the value to clients.
Yeah.
That's this part.
Do you think we'll ever get to the point where you can just tell a client and they'll believe you?
I don't know. I don't know. I work with all sorts of different clients.
Mhm.
Usually the hardest clients are when coming to me is a bit of a stretch for them.
Yeah.
they've had to spend a bit more than maybe they would have liked because, it's a big investment. They feel like it needs to be perfect. Those types of clients are tricky. They like to get very involved in the minutia of design. Whereas, you get someone who spends like upwards of $10,000-$20,000 on a logo, and they're like, signed off, no problem,
Yeah.
have it. And they trust you. And that's right there. That's telling, isn't it? Like, when they do value it, it's an easier sell.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot your question. Which
No.
type of clients? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just curious. I was just curious about that because it's just like, will there ever come a time you think as a designer and a seasoned designer like yourself that once they reach out to you, they should know by either word of mouth or through research, like, hey, okay, he doesn't have to sell me on it. Just let's work
Yeah.
and bang this
That
thing out.
that's our job though, isn't it? And that's the job of your portfolio and how you put yourself out there. I'm working with this guy called Rob O'Rourke at the minute, and he's a fantastic like sales funnel expert. Okay, he's helping me basically do that hard work for me. So when someone comes to my website, by the time they get on a call with me, a series of my website and a series of emails will have done all the selling for me, so that by the time they get on the call, they already know I'm the right man for the job, and it's just about having a conversation and finding out more for the job.
Oh man.
And that comes from your portfolio, that comes from
Mhm.
testimonials from other clients, comes from proven results. And that's hard. It's a hard thing to measure with logo designers. Like, how has a logo affected this company? How has your design
Yeah.
given a clear return on investment? And it's really difficult to pin down with logo design because there's no
Yeah.
metrics behind, my company increased 40% year on year after we rebranded. It's like, did it have facts because of that? Was that all because of the logo, or was that because of your hard
Right.
work? And that's a hard thing to say. So, trying to find those, that clear, return on what that new brand has done for that business is a really difficult thing to pin down. And Rob's been trying to help me with that. And he does things like he finds, rather than saying that there was a clear return,
Mhm.
he'll find facts and figures about the business. Like, for instance, one of my clients, after they rebranded, raised $6 million in funding, and he's like,
Wow.
"There's your line right there." Client testimonial, raised $6 million after our rebrand. Like, did I help them raise $6 million? No, but did it happen after I rebranded their company? Yes. So
Absolutely.
there's a little gray area there where you can kind of like show that there is a clear like return,
Yeah.
but not necessarily a fixed figure. It's a hard thing. It's a
Mhm.
hard thing to do.
All right. So let's focus on the man, big game James. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
Okay, so I love a good old design conference. I love
Mm.
going to hang out with other designers. I live in Australia now, so I moved from the UK about 4 years ago, from the center of London to a place called the Gold Coast of Australia. And where I live, it's not remote, but there's not much of a graphic design scene here at
Mhm.
all. And I'm starved for like contact with other designers. So I'd
Community.
get out to
Yeah.
every networking event I possibly can, even around here where there's not that many. I'm there, and I will travel to the ends of the earth. Like, I went to Creative South 3 weeks ago, and it was
Oh,
like 10,000 miles of travel. I went through Canada, got stuck there at the airport. I missed a day of travel just to get to this conference. But boy, does it recharge my batteries when I go and hang out with other designers and see other
yeah.
creatives and get inspired by illustrators who are just
Mhm.
on top of their game right now. I'm very lucky that I've had a bit of success on social media, and I now have access to these people, and I can create
Yeah.
them my friends, and I love that, and I'd love to work more with them and collaborate as much as
Mhm.
possible. I'm kind of working on a little secret project now with a couple of designers. Lord knows how long it's going to take to get out there in the real world, but I'm
Mhm.
happy that we're doing it, and it would never have come had I not gone to a design conference and met them in person. So that's where I get mine from. And then the rest is obvious. It's design books and a little bit of Googling online, and
Yeah.
social media again is great for that. I've built up a huge network of other graphic designers, and I follow them all, and I love their work, and they recharge my batteries. So yeah, other people in our space. It's not about being competitive, it's about being collaborative.
Got it. So, how important is it to stay curious, observant, and open hearted as a designer?
Open-hearted, massively. I mean,
Mm.
I'm all for like transparency and sharing, and I think that's one of the reasons I've had so much success online is that I share everything I find out.
Yeah,
Like if I learn a new tip or a trick or a tool or sort of process, I'll put it right out there in the world. Didn't use it
yeah,
that way. Everyone used to gatekeep and like lock it all down. And when agencies were competitive, they don't want to share their processes. But these days,
yeah,
we live in a world where you actually grow by
yeah.
sharing. I did a talk about this. It was called See One, Do One, Teach One. And by sharing what you know, you actually become a better designer. It's one of those
Mhm.
weird things that by reformatting that knowledge in your brain in a way that you can understand to share it with somebody else, you actually remember it better. And it's wild. Like all these videos that I've made about graphic design processes, how to work with clients, fundamentals of design, questions like
Yeah.
why don't we use red, green, and blue ink in our printers? Why do we use CMYK? And
Mhm.
know, being honest, I didn't really know the answer to that question until I looked it up and shared it online, and now I know the answer. And it actually came up as a question in my Adobe certified exam. I was like, great! And how amazing is that? Like by sharing it, that knowledge stuck in my brain, and I passed my Adobe Illustrator certification. They're all
Congrats, man. That's dope.
yeah. This is what we were talking about off camera before about teaching. Sorry
Mhm.
to your listeners, but I have huge imposter syndrome about teaching other people because I have no qualifications in it whatsoever. I just have lots of experience in the design industry. So in order to kind of get like one accreditation, I took the Adobe certified professional
Yeah.
exam for Illustrator, and it's like it's a proper exam. You have to sit it under test conditions. In your office, you got to disconnect all of your external monitors. You have a webcam to prove that there's no one in the room and there's nothing that you can cheat. And you sit down for an hour and you do an exam on the software, and there's like 20 practical things that you have to do, and then
Mhm.
I think it's like 10 or 20 multiple choice questions. And almost got a perfect score. I was got one question wrong. I thought
Oh, man.
it wasn't. It really bugs me. But yeah, that was like that was cool just to kind of get that accreditation, just so I can make sure that I feel a bit better about teaching other people when I've got
Yeah.
food in my bag.
Well, you guys, he's being very humble. This man is teaching over 580,000 people every day on his Instagram through his tutorials. So don't let him fool you. He's a genius. He knows what he's doing. All right, James. So let's have a little fun here. All right. We're gonna have a quick fire round. Um, our conversation has just been so good, and I'm just like excited and enjoying all these gems you're sharing with us. But we're gonna have a quick fire round. First thing that comes to mind, okay?
Okay.
What font do you secretly love but will never admit in public?
I did a t-shirt design recently with Cooper Black. Yeah, old-fashioned sort of retro 60s, 70s font. It was great. And I tweaked it a little bit. It was fantastic. Cooper Black. Yeah.
All right. Favorite logo of all time, and it can't be yours.
Oh, I answered this one recently.
Oh, you did.
N64 logo. I love it. It's not the best designed logo in the world. It's got lots of colors, doesn't work well in one color, but it's one of those logos that has nostalgia for me. Makes me feel
Yeah.
like I'm a kid again. Yeah.
Mine is the old PlayStation logo
Yeah.
where it was like
Yeah.
the yeah, exactly that, where it was very much a mouth. I was like, I love that logo. All right, here we go.
The computer game logos there. I love it.
Yeah. Here we go. One typeface you have to use for the rest of your life and you can't change it.
Oh, Futura PT. There's so many different weights. I use it in everything.
I'm a future
My
guy.
all time
I'm a future guy. Yes. You're designing under pressure. What's your go-to fuel to keep you going?
fuel.
Mhm.
Do you mean like
Snack. Yeah, snack,
oh,
water, liquid. What is your go-to?
Diet Coke, coffee, and a bag of chips. I'm
Okay.
a secret, fatty. Can't live without my caffeine.
Okay. If your design process was a movie title, what would it be called?
Right.
I told you.
Okay. All right. So, sorry, this is very quick fire. My process is like take lots of breaks and start again each day. So it will be like Groundhog Day, starting from scratch. Go to sleep, come back to your design, look at it fresh with new eyes, go back to sleep, and then I have like 2 weeks of that. And having lots of breaks in the process means that I
Mm,
come up with better work for sure.
okay, we have two more. What's a design trend you hope never comes back?
Or like skeuomorphism, like things looking real. You remember like the old iPhone where everything
Mhm.
was shiny and had a material on it? Yeah.
Had a gloss effect on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, last one. One tool you cannot live without besides your computer.
Like hardware for the office?
Anything, but it can't be your anything. One tool you cannot live without.
I should, I should say sketchbook, shouldn't I? That'd be a wanky fucking side answer, but it's not. It's this mouse, the Logitech MX Master 3, yeah, plug for Logitech.
Uh,
This mouse, I moved from the Magic Mouse a few years ago, and I will never look back. It is brilliant. It's such a speedy little tool. Either that or sorry, another one. The Creator Micro by Work Louder, this little macro pad. It stitches into
yeah.
Adobe Illustrator. Got loads of like Pathfinder buttons on this. It's
Yeah.
one of those. Yeah.
Oh, dope. Well, James, looking back, what's been one of the proudest moments of your career so far?
Oh, I think my public speaking that I've done recently, speaking on stage to a room packed with graphic designers, really put me out of my comfort zone. I was nervous. I'm not a great public speaker, if I'm being completely honest, but I worked really hard on it and it went down really well. So I think that was one of the proudest moments. Got some great photos as well. Me like
That's
addressing a
amazing.
room. This looks great. Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, before we wrap it up, any advice you would give your younger self starting design now that you're here?
I'd start earlier. I got into it way too late. I was 25 when I retrained to do but to become a designer. And by that point, I'm 6, 7 years behind most other people. Didn't study it. I studied music, multimedia, and electronics at university. I wanted to be a record producer, and then realized after a job, an office job, I was like, this is brilliant. Why have I not been doing this sooner? So I started way too late. So I'm like, I'm 6 or 7 years behind where I should be right now as a 40-year-old. Imagine what I'd be doing. I'd be a millionaire now.
I think every designer's goal is to be a millionaire. I think every designer's goal is. Yeah. All right, James, where can people find your work and where can people follow you and reach out to you?
Thanks. All right. Well, my website is barnard.co. That's my portfolio. And all the social media handles are at barnard.co. So you can find me there.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Luke.
Well, you guys, this has been a wonderful conversation. This is the Art School Graduate. My name is Justin Robinson. Don't let this man fool you. He is a master instructor himself, James Barnard. Thank you guys so much for listening. Peace.
Thanks for having me, mate. Take it easy.